Okay, villains. I find them actually quite hard to talk about because there are different ways of doing a villain. I think you need to think in your story about really, you want someone who's going to prevent your protagonist from getting what they want. And that could be someone who's deliberately trying to go against them for their own ends, someone who's got evil intent or who wants to hurt them in some way. Or it could be someone who just has a different set of values and a different agenda, which runs against, counter to what the child wants. In children's fiction, I mean, you have a range of very effective villains, which sort of stretch from the real cartoonish types, Cruella de Vil, to someone very nuanced, like Severus Snape, who turns out not to be a villain at all, or someone like Mrs. Coulter in Philip Pullman's it's in Northern Lights and the others, Golden Compass trilogy, who who doesn't want what her daughter wants, but has her own set of values. And I mean, she's an incredibly scary, powerful person. And because we don't know quite where she's coming from, we think she could harm Lyra, and then she turns out not to. So that kind of ambiguous character can be very powerful. In almost all cases, we can sort of understand what it is that the villain wants. So Mrs. Trunchbull, wants to get the upper hand and power and wealth. Someone like the White Witch in Narnia also wants power. Someone, I mean, the evildoer in something like Ender's Game, the enemy is an alien being who seems to want to take over the earth, but in subsequent books turns out to have been a benign force who is simply misunderstood. And the rest of the series is about making restitution for the terrible crime of killing a whole species. So, I mean, there are lots of different ways that you can do villains. I mean, for your own novel, think about what I think, even in the most cartoonish, there has to be a reason why the villain behaves as they do. And I think, as a general lesson for children, I think it makes more sense for them to see that most people act for a reason. They don't necessarily simply act just to be difficult and to make other people's lives hard. I mean, some people do, but the vast majority of people who do things you don't want do them because they have reasons of their own. And perhaps that might be a better life lesson than to divide the world into a black and white, good and evil kind of setup, though people do argue that's what children's books should do. So in summary, I'm a little bit conflicted about what the function, how you should go about doing a villain, because in each of my books I've kind of found a different kind of villain. Sometimes it's someone who is simply fighting on a different side of a battle. Sometimes it has been someone who's so desperately insecure and frightened about their own position that they've done a lot of evil things to retain it. So it really does depend upon the book. But I think I urge you to think about how they appear to the protagonist, and then how perhaps they might justify their behaviour to themselves. I think that's all I can offer, really. We can talk about it in the next class.